call our special call meeting for the City Commissioners to order November 6, 2007. Call roll, please.
Stevens.
Here.
Tran. O'Neill.
Here.
Mills.
Here.
Young.
Here.
Peterson.
Here.
Holt.
Here.
Yes, quorum.
We have a quorum, thank you. Before we start tonight, this is a public hearing. We are going to combine this as a work session. The first part of our meeting, you guys see that there's some agendas out there that match this agenda, and we're going to be, presented a lot of information here in the very beginning, some history, and a lot of really just good information from a lot of experts, some of our local staff here. And if you would, we're going to go through this. Put your questions down on this sheet. Hopefully there's enough of them out there. Write your questions down and let us get through this thing, or we'll be here till midnight. So please respect the information that's being given, and we'll have time for your questions and also some time for some public comments at the end. So we'll start with item number 1, public hearing and discussion regarding long-term water needs and alternatives.
It's my privilege to introduce to everyone Dr. Ken Crawford. He is the director of the Oklahoma Climatological Survey. He gave a terrific presentation a couple weeks ago during the Governor's Water Conference, and he's very graciously agreed to share some of the same information with us in terms of framing what the rest of our evening is going to be about. So with that, Dr. Crawford, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here. I am an employee of the University of Oklahoma, therefore I'm a state employee, and I feel like I'm serving the citizens of Oklahoma by being here tonight. I'm assisted tonight with my colleague, Dr. Mark Schaefer, who runs our climate services group. We would like to think that we are a resource that you can use as you plan your water resources. I have business cards up here. I have some Oklahoma Mesonet stuff right up here. These are the kind of things that we do, and if you want to contact me later, there are contact information. My presentation today, your IT person, will deal with climate change and what that will have as an impact on the water supplies across Oklahoma. I have given to Jim 3 color copies of my PowerPoint slides here to leave behind. You have them here on this laptop. You're free to redistribute as you need. And I also have left behind a statement that we as the State Climate Office, State of Oklahoma, have issued on climate change and what it means to the citizens of our state in the decades ahead. That's also available for your further use. The purpose of my presentation today is to tell you what I think are some of the impacts coming of a warming climate across our globe and what its impacts might be on state of Oklahoma during the 21st century. There, as you well know from reading what you hear in the broadcast media and in the print media, there are extremes of views on climate change. There's one camp here and there's one camp there, and there isn't a lot of middle ground. And there are intelligent people on both sides of the fence. I'm going to try to help you sort through all of this mishmash and to tell you what I think it means. But I think you will agree that we've perhaps come to a point now where we can't at the dinner table talk about religion, politics, and now the weather, just because we're in 2 different camps on a lot of things. Where I'm going to draw my information from is from an intergovernmental panel on climate change that was established back in 1988. It is a credible organization. It is the viewpoint that we at the Climate Survey at the University of Oklahoma agree with. They are not a research organization. They were a synthesizer of information on climate information. And when they came and did their thing, and they're still doing it, they represented 130 countries across our globe. The most recent report had 800 authors in it, 2,500 peer reviews. and it was a historically unprecedented piece of work that in scale, scope, and ambition. And so it will say pretty much what I'm about to tell you, but I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version here tonight. The evidence is the globe is warming. Now, we can debate all night why, but it doesn't matter. If it warms, it warms. It doesn't matter whether it's this or that. What are the impacts of a warming climate? Well, let me give you the observational evidence, and there's many more that I could have given you, but I'm giving you this one slide. The top graph is a graph of global average temperatures over the last 150 years. 1850 is on the left side of the graph. The early part of this century is on the right side of the graph. And the English statement on the right side says that warming of the climate system is unequivocal, as is now evident from observations of increases in global average air temperature, ocean temperatures, widespread melting of snow and ice, rising sea levels. The middle graph is the average sea level as measured worldwide, and over the last 125 years, sea level has been rising. That would reflect melting glaciers and melting polar ice caps. And then the final slide at the very bottom is the snow cover in the northern hemisphere, and there suggests, even though it's only a limited period of record, that there has been a slight decrease in overall average snow cover in the northern hemisphere. So what are the projections? That's what we really care about. What can we know with any degree of certainty, and how certain can we be of anything? If we can't trust tomorrow's weather forecast, how can we possibly trust a climate projection 30 to 40 to 50 years into the future? And the answer is you can't. But it's the best we have, and it is a planning tool, and it's just that, no more than a planning tool. So, but what does it say? Well, that's a very busy diagram. It shows the northern and southern hemispheres on both sides of the screen. The leftmost screen is a December, January, February average precipitation during the 21st century, and the rightmost figure is a June, July, August projected patterns of precipitation changes. And as you can see from the red tones, that there is a projected decrease primarily in summertime precipitation. That is the figure on the right side. In the blue tones, there would be a projected increase due to a warming climate as a result of climate change. Well, looking at the United States, which is in the upper left of that rightmost figure, it is mostly white, and in the southwestern part of the U.S., there are tinges of red tones. The suggestion is a warming climate will dry out the southwestern part of the United States. Year to year, maybe not. This year is a huge anomaly in our rainfall patterns, but we have been in a 3 to 4 year dry period, and I'll get into that in just a moment. The point is that particular figure suggests, and all climate scientists agree, that a warming climate does dry out the interiors of large continents. We fortunately in the United States have an economy and a society that is robust. Look at the dark red areas in parts of Africa in the middle part of the rightmost diagrams. Huge problems coming in an area where they are least equipped to deal with it. And so if you've ever heard the phrases, biblical proportions of famines and pestilences, if this happens, we will be reading those as our headlines in the years ahead. Well, as the national academies in Washington, D.C. said in a recent report, there are always winners and losers when there are major changes in anything. And in the impact of climate change, yes, there will be winners and losers. But globally, the losses are to be expected to far outweigh the benefits that will come from a warming climate. In our part of the world, the suggestion is we will warm, we will dry. Well, take a look at this figure from August the 12th, 1936. This was the afternoon high temperatures on that day. And on that day, it hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit in the southwestern part of Oklahoma. And over in east central Oklahoma, it also hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit.
Sorry about that.
No problem. I think it's best if I wait just a moment. Unless Don tells me it's not going to get fixed. That's better. Jim, the reason I paused is there's a very important point to be made in the slide, so
It's okay.
I'm going to wait on my punchline.
Let's just wait a minute.
Okay, no problem. I would be happy to thoughts that are prepare a thoughtful response.
Yes, yes.
Test, 1, 2, 3. I got it? Okay, the point of this image is this is a date that we have observed in Oklahoma weather. The Dust Bowl days of the 1930s. Look how hot it was on that day. Every place is above 100 degrees, and most places are in the mid 115 teen range, if you will. Think of what that will mean to a society today in terms of their water demand, their water use. If it's that hot, we're going to be using far more water than maybe we have been in recent decades. So if it has happened once, it can happen again. So the new climate is the following. There is a bell-shaped curve on the left side of that diagram. That may be the old climate that we've been used to, that we grew up with. Sometimes it's cold on the left side of the diagram. Sometimes it's warm on the right side of that. And the middle part of the diagram is maybe the average Oklahoma temperature year in, year out, decade in, decade out. If we increase the mean temperature of the globe, our mean temperature will increase, our winters will warm, but more importantly, we will have more record hot weather in the decades that lie ahead. And so as you deal with what does this all mean, please don't pay attention to any one weather map. Any one weather map will never say, well, if the globe is warming, how come it's so cold outside? Well, we will have cold winters. We will have very hot summers. When you consider decade by decade by decade, you will begin to see the increases there. But I also ask that you consider looking at the headlines that are being made around not only our state, but our nation. And these are headlines that I clip out of the Norman transcript. Headlines that are already being written: water shortages, more water wars fears as the West goes dry. And in other newspapers, all of them from our vicinity, except maybe the one labeled the Baltimore Sun. But bottom line, the newspaper headlines are already beginning to talk about water shortages that we're having. Or consider this lead-in sentence from a Associated Press report out of North Georgia just about a week ago. And this was their lead sentence to this article dealing with water shortages in the Atlanta metropolitan area. Despite plenty of warnings, critics say, Georgia never got around to developing a water management plan to handle a severe drought. Now that water reservoirs are already shrinking and water supplies are threatened, lawmakers are scrambling to cope. And the article goes on and on and on. It does not paint a very pretty picture of lack of planning. Well, here's where we began these kind of discussions. And that on the left side is the historical period of rain since 1895. You'll see the horizontal bars moving from right to left and now back left to right. Those are saying that the wet years of the 1980s and the 1990s were larger than any other wet period that we've had in the recorded history of Oklahoma, and they are on par with the deficits of the great droughts of the 1930s. The second point that this particular slide has in it is the horizontal line being the mean average rainfall for Oklahoma. The red shades below would be drought years. The more green tones above would be the more wet years. Is that the 1980s and 1990s were an unusually wet period, unlike anything we've seen in our 105-year history of recorded observations. Why is that important? Well, I don't know how it is in your community, but in my community, everybody's getting younger, except me. And I'm finding that the bulk of the people that I associate with are 25 years old and younger. This is when they grew up. This is what they think is the norm. But the norm is not that. That is the abnorm, what happened in the 80s and the 90s. And that particular period was very consistently wet. And so we have a society that has grown up around a very narrow range of year-to-year variability and rainfall, and we may have developed some bad habits as a society.
Dr. Crawford, I'm sorry to do this. Can you back up a slide?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to point something out. I got my own phaser here. What I found interesting, here's a period of drought, and then that's a real wet year right in the middle of it, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, and that's happening this year. On the very rightmost side of the diagram, that's the last 4 or 5 years. We've been very dry as we began the 21st century, except this year. It's an unusually wet year. Yeah. But I do believe we have turned the corner, and we have now entered a phase of being more likely to be very dry than very wet. But even in the midst of the drought, as you pointed out, of the 30s, and I can't see the graph from here, but I believe that's the 1920s. 19 teens, thank you, Mark. Yes, in the middle of a drought, you can have unusually wet periods. But everybody says, well, normal didn't occur. Well, normal never occurs. Normal just never occurs. The horizontal black bar in the middle of that diagram is the average warm season rainfall for the state of Oklahoma from 1895. It's about 21 inches of rain is the long-term average. You'll see year-to-year variations around that average, but a third of those years are above average, and we get around 26 inches of rain in those very wet years. But a third of those years are below average, and we get about 16 inches of rain. We shift a plus or minus 5 inches of rain. About every third year will either be normal, 5 inches or so below normal, or 5 inches or so above normal. We must plan for the climate extremes to intensify. So what happens when we plan for the norm but it doesn't occur? Well, if we get a typical dry season, no problem. We'll just pull what we need out of the ground and make up for the deficit we didn't get from the atmosphere. But in a typical wet season, when we get a 5-inch surplus, some of that goes back to recharge our aquifers and our various lakes, but a large percent runs off in the rivers to Louisiana and Arkansas. And we do not recharge at the rate at which we withdraw. So what are the implications for Oklahoma? The implications is the warm season will be longer than it has been. It will arrive earlier. We're going to see earlier maturing of our winter wheat and orchard crops, leaving them vulnerable to very late season freezes. But the red bullets are the ones that count for this meeting here today. Year-round evaporation from the ground will increase. Why? Because it's ever so slightly warmer, and we'll get more evaporation from the ground and transpiration from the green vegetation. We believe that the drought frequency and severity will increase. that those drier conditions will beget wildfires and increased risk of wildfires. And the final bullet that you can see there. At the citizen level, what does it mean? Well, it means that fresh, new sources of water are not on the horizon right now. Thus, it appears to me that more Oklahomans are going to be exposed to water stress than we ever have. And if climate change comes rapidly, it will be very difficult for us to adapt. If it comes more slowly, we have a chance to adapt. So, my advice on people who ask what I think the red bullet there, sustainability is the key. Sustainability must be the design criteria on which we manage Oklahoma's water resources, lest we return to a period of the 1930s when we had unchecked consumptive use of water. I don't know how to comment on that point anymore, but I think that's the key point of my presentation. So here's the final word slide. The word slide is, what do we at the Climate Survey conclude to be true? Well, we conclude that the Earth is warming and has warmed and will continue to warm. And whether it's human-induced or not, it really doesn't matter all that much to me. What matters is, will my grandchildren have water to live off of when I'm long since gone? And I'll let somebody else sort out all the reasons. I just want my grandchildren to have water. The fact that fact then means that the citizens of Oklahoma are more and more are going to come to depend upon and require adequate supplies of fresh water. Because our future then lies in our available access to fresh water, we must exercise due diligence to protect our water resources. Why is that? Well, as I had some pre-meeting conversations, the National Geographic made a statement about 25 years ago as they were doing a story on water. And they had just come out of a oil shortage, and they made a statement about water. Unlike oil, there is no water alternative. We do not have an option here. So my concluding point then is this: whatever our future, warmer or not, water management plans must measure and understand the water budget, what we have to deal with here, and our policies must reflect the reality of the world in which we live. But if the globe doesn't warm and our grandchildren said, what did they worry about? They will at least have adequate water supplies because we took a path of least regret. We do not regret where our grandchildren ended up. And with that, I say thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure.
I assume that you are not going to hang around for the rest of our presentation, so if anyone has any questions of Mr. Crawford, we'll go ahead and entertain those at this point.
I'm available to hang around if you would like me to hang around, but if you don't want me, I probably haven't had dinner, and I'll feel it in a little bit, so I will...
We'd like for you to stay, Dr. Crawford, if you can.
I am going to stay some, and I don't know about my colleague Mark, but we'll be here for a bit because we believe water is the number one societal issue of the whole wide world the rest of my lifetime, and that's the message I teach my students at OU.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay.
You guys have any questions? Questions? Oh, yeah, over there. Yep.
Some states and municipalities are already encouraging conservation by encouraging people to use their gray water. It's a law in Oklahoma. Arizona lets you use any of it. And anyone uses it for except especially landscaping, which is going to all our plants. Is anyone involved in the water issue considering changing our codes and our laws to allow us to use gray water or encourage us to do that? So go in our sewage system, we can tax the sewage system. And do you know that, or your climate incentive, whether that's...
You're asking a meteorologist turned climatologist to comment on gray water. I can tell you what I think as a citizen. I think as a citizen that that's a very common sense idea. Okay, there may be a tax on the sewage systems, but why do I have our most precious water resources going to wash my cars when I'd rather have it to live and drink and grow my food? And so it's not rocket science from my point of view. but that's not my area of expertise.
And it is, we've discussed it, analyzed it. Not only that, but, you know, having cisterns in our backyards that catch runoff to water our yards out of with a sump pump of some type. And but it all comes down to money and dollars. And it would take a separate distribution system.
If the codes were changed, new homes could be constructed with the cistern to take the water off.
That's correct.
Oh, yeah.
That's correct.
They could be constructed with your washing machine water, goes into the cistern, so you can use it to water your yard instead of getting
Right.
our other water resources. I mean, that requires a code change, and that doesn't cost you.
That's a good point. There's quite a movement, particularly within the building community and other parts of the country in particular, about allowing for those kinds of construction practices. And we are beginning to examine that, but that's going to need to be partly a grassroots movement as well. It needs to be bottom-up driven rather than top-down. And that's part of the educational process, and that's the reason we're having this discussion, and other people are having similar discussions, not only here but around the country. That's a very valid point.
On the signatures to get you to change the code.
Well, I mean,
I think there's a lot of people that would like gray water to be used to flush the water. And I don't mean toilets. So flush wasn't the right term.
yeah, there are different levels of regulation, of course. You know, I mean, the cities are creatures of the state, so to speak. We're subordinate to the state. And from an environmental standpoint, the DEQ, of course, answers to the EPA, as everybody answers to the EPA. Okay, so yes, and it is a state initiative that certainly we would be very interested in participating in. Yeah, Dr. Craig.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Crawford, I'm wondering whether the whole issue of rainfall needs to be raised in certain states. As you say, consumption of water versus availability, even in a normal time. Aren't we about to cross anyway? Just by population and years usage, don't we really face something similar to the oil crisis? Except that we don't have a replacement alternative?
We do not have a replacement alternative. The answer is yes. And I don't know how it is in Shawnee, but I know, having lived in Norman for 35 plus years, in the mid-1960s, the water consumption per citizen was somewhere around 70 gallons per day per human in Norman, and now it's almost double that. And so I think the wet 1980s and wet 1990s may be a lingering a bad habit that we developed when we saw it as an unending supply at the tap. Yes, we're about to cross a consumptive use that will be greater than our supply, and it's like balancing your checkbook at the bank. You don't write checks for any more than you deposit. Less bad things happen.
Yeah. Which again, we will be talking about the long-term strategy here in just a few minutes.
And Joe, you bring up a good point. Jim's made the comment many times, why are we watering our yards and washing our cars with treated water, you know, our precious water supply, when we should be using something like gray water? And it's just working through the costs and distribution of that. So it's not a foreign subject for us. It's trying to work out how we're going to pay for it and who's going to pay for it. So, any other questions? Okay, John.
I find it interesting that a state like Georgia would probably claim to be more progressive than we are. I don't know if it's true or not, but probably claim it. How in the world did they get in the position that they're in, and how do we avoid that? It looks to me like that would be repeated 50 times.
The average rainfall in North Georgia is 50 inches a year. The average rainfall in Oklahoma, statewide, east-west, is about almost 34 inches per year. We have less to begin with than they do. I think Oklahomans have a frontier spirit. We lived through the Dust Bowl era. Our parents taught us well. We're living off that history, legacy. We need to teach our children as well as we were taught, and we need to leave them a good legacy. I cannot explain everything that happened in North Georgia. I just know it's not just limited to North Georgia. I have a story in my packet of information. There's a small town in Tennessee near Chattanooga. They've run out of water. They turn on the water spigot at 6 p.m. At 9 p.m. at night, they turn it off, And for 21 hours, it's off. For 3 hours, you do everything that you plan to do with water. Huge inconvenience.
If I could add to that also, of course, the state is in a process of redoing the comprehensive water plan. The current document we're operating off of as a state was written and finalized in 1995. And there have been hearings around the region, most recently a couple of months ago, maybe at Gordon.
August 7th.
August 7th, thank you. At Gordon Cooper, there will be additional meetings where these discussions will be taking place. So movement has been taken. I also want to, frankly, compliment the state's leaders of half a century ago by building those reservoirs. If those decisions had not been made, the state would be in trouble right now.
I guess my final comment is that the unusually wet year we've endured will go away, and the droughts will return, and we will have to cope, and let's learn lessons at somebody else's expense while we can.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now that we have the, did I break this by touching it?
Tap it again.
Tap it again. Okay, it's a little scary, isn't it? Okay, now we're going to have our city engineer, Mr. Kyricky, to come up and, I'm on the scary pictures to lead off with, to talk about the where we are currently and some of our infrastructure needs, and he'll be followed by Jim Baird, our utility director, to talk about the treatment, water treatment and wastewater treatment. John?
Rex, you've gone from the water to the air. I'm impressed.
I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the Shawnee Lakes, some of the information and data we've gotten on the Twin Lakes. A couple of years ago, in 2004, when the lake level was getting really, really low, there was a lot of concern about the actual capacity of the volume or storage ability of the lake itself. We didn't have any good data for that, so we decided to map the two lakes. Where's the light? Okay, where's the light? Thank you. Okay, what we did on the thing was the lake bottom was contoured utilizing cloth tape that was graduated in foot increments and tenths of feet, and also we utilized a GPS receiver to get the XY coordinates. We took hundreds of measurements, and the elevations of the floor bottom were calculated based on the existing elevation of the water at that time. Then a contour map of 1 foot increments was developed. We got the surface boundary of the existing surface area by actually traversing the perimeter of the lake and taking XY coordinates every 100 feet. On the next slide, next slide is for lake number 1, which shows how many points that we took. We took 556 points, and each one of those points actually represents a XY coordinate that we could actually locate again. Lake number 2, we took 251 measurements to do our calculations on. Now, the volumes that we came up with was compared to an older study, 1947 sediment survey by the Soil Conservation Service. In 1947, it was a limited study that only had 11 ranges or cross sections and only had 38 total points or data points taken, actual water depth measurements. They reported at that time the original capacity of lake number 1 at 24,568 acre feet, and from their study they found that the existing capacity in 47 to be at 23,816 acre feet. Based on the 1947 study, it was determined at that time that the total depletion of storage capacity of Lake Number 1 was at 3.10%, or at a rate of 0.25% per year. And I would say that this was a 12-year time period because the lake was built in the early 30s and water was first impounded in 1935. In 1957, 10 years later, a sediment survey by the Soil Conservation Service was again performed. At this time, the study was considered more detailed than the previous one. In 1947, they had a total 98 points for water depth measurements, as compared to what we took in 2004 of 556. They reported in their report that the original capacity, storage capacity of the lake was at 23,429 acre feet. And based on the study that they did at that time, the existing capacity of the lake was determined to be 22,327 acre feet. So from the 1957 study, it was determined that the loss or depletion in storage since 1935, now we're talking a 22-year period, was at 4.7%, or at a rate of 0.22% per year. And they actually found that from that study that the rate of storage loss was actually declining. So it was looking better. I mean, the lake wasn't silting in as fast as what it had been the previous 10 years. Our data that we came up with was based on the original capacity of the lake reported from design was at 22,600 acre feet for an elevation of 1072.5. The 1072.5 was the actual original design elevation of the spillway, but back in 1960 when Lake Number 2 was added, the spillway was actually raised 1 foot to where it is today, 1073. But based on the original design capacity, for that same elevation, we determined that the total loss of storage was calculated at 10.44%, and that's now for a 69-year period, from 1935 to 2004, and based on that, well, actually 68-year period, and based on that, we determined the rate of loss or depletion was at 0.15% per year. So the rate of storage loss is declining, or has been declining, probably due to better management practices of the fields and the pastures and more grassland out that way. Based on the 1957 sediment survey and the existing capacity of the lake at that time, which was reported at 22,327, well, I think I got ahead of myself. And our results, well, the 1957 sediment survey, for now going back to 1935, for that 22-year period, showed a storage loss of 9.35% and showed a rate per year at 0.2% for storage percent. Based on the total original acre feet capacity of the Twin Lakes reported at 34,000 acre feet, because in 1960 when Lake Number 2 was developed, the actual acre feet or design acre feet capacity of storage was at 11,400, and so with Lake Number 1 at 22,600, the total that we were basing our data on was at 34,000 acre feet. So in our results from 2004, we came up with, and it's on, let me just get it real quick. That right there is just the contour showing the lakes. The normal pool elevation is at 1067. There, right there is the data that we came up with as far as at foot increments, the total volume, total acre feet, and then the total gallon capacity at different elevations. At the 1072.5 elevation, we had total storage of, 1073.5, had a total storage of 30,701 acre feet of water capacity. And compared that to the 34,000 acre foot of design for the two lakes, we determined that the storage loss at 9.7%. Now, we didn't break it down into a depletion per year because lake number 2 came online in 1960 and lake number 1 was 1935, and we're totaling up volumes for both lakes and combining them together. Just to give you some, oops. Just to give you some general information on the Shawnee Twin Lake, the flood pool elevation is at 1073.5 today because that's the actual elevation of the spillway. And we have an uncontrolled dam. We don't have any, we can't control how much it comes out through the outlets. It's a spillway gravity type outlet. So I mean, it's uncontrolled spillway. The normal pool elevation is at 1067, and the minimum pool elevation would be at 1043.5. And that elevation is actually the bottom, near the bottom intake valve where we can actually draw water out of the lake. Just some other facts on oops, sorry about that. The normal pool, as I said before, was at 1067. The Twin Lakes has a small drainage basin. We only have 34 square miles of drainage basin or watershed that feeds the lakes. And if it doesn't rain, what the tributaries feed them are dry. I mean, it's not a continuously running creeks that feed the lakes. The maximum depth of the lakes is at 46 feet for both lakes. And again, the total volume that we for the design was at 34,000 acre feet. This was just kind of reiterating that the normal pool elevation is at 1067. Okay, now this chart here is actually some information on our 30-inch raw water line that comes from the lake. It basically is telling us how much volume, in million gallons per day, can be transported to the lake at various depths or heights of the water surface at lake number 1. As you see from the normal pool elevation at 1067, through that pipe can be delivered 8.12 million gallons per day. And if it goes down to 1062, it can deliver 7.41 million gallons per day. It could go all the way down to almost 1052 and still deliver 5 million or 5.7 million gallons per day. The next chart is the same thing for West Watkins Reservoir. Again, this is West Watkins pipeline is tied into our 30-inch pipeline, and then it transports the water on down to our treatment plant. And based on the elevations of just drawing water off of West Watkins at an elevation of 1074, you can deliver 7.67 million gallons per day through the pipeline. And then if 10 foot lower at 1064, West Watkins can deliver 6.54 million gallons per day. This is just to show you kind of the different capacities that we have and what we're able to deliver to the treatment plant, drawn off of the various reservoirs. Now, the lakes have gotten low, and they've gotten low before. I just included this slide to show that this was actually taken in 1955, just of Shawnee Lake. And at that time, the elevation of the lake had gotten down to 1055. Now, back up here in 2004, that's where the water surface elevation was in 2004 at 1066. So the lakes go down and they come up and they go down. I mean, that right there is 2004, showing what the elevation of the lake was at around 1065. And then last year, just about a year ago, August 17th, right before we let the project to redo the intake towers, which to redo the valves and put on, the lake level was at 1061, and today, the lake level, according to the tower, was at 1072. Now, I didn't check the USGS site to see if that, how accurate that is. It has been varied about a half a foot or so.
All right,
That's
thanks, John.
all the information I had, and I just entertain questions. I mean,
Oh, we're good. We're good later.
Yeah.
Kim? Thanks, John.
Okay, that's it. Any questions?
You're not getting by that easy.
There's 3 or 4 different departments. This water treatment plant, we want to increase the capacity to 15 million gallons a day. That means more filters and another clarifier. We want to add an additional clear well. We only have 1 clear well at the water plant. When we need to get it worked on, we have to hire divers to go in and work on it because we can't take it out of service. It would give us more storage. Addition of mechanical sweep to the pre-sedimentation basin. That is the new, where they put the new lid on the basin, but it was supposed to be 4 feet tall. Somehow it became 18 inches or 2 feet tall. So there's a trough all the way around it. For them to clean it, they got a duck walk all the way around that. Yeah, well, this is a mechanical arm basically that will do that for them. And then tear down the old water plant building. I didn't have any idea how much money that would be, but that would be a good location for the additional clear well. High service pumps and controls, we've been talking about that for quite a while. That's $1 million, maybe a little bit high, but not much, because every year it goes up for the pumps and just like pipe. I mean, everything's going up, fuel. And then we have a leak in the clear well right now that we need to get divers in and fix. It's not major, but it needs to be fixed. The lake number 2, the intake tower needs to be fixed like number 1 was, new valves and screens. We need to upgrade the lab at the water plant. We had money this year to do that. We had to use it for the crane and for something else.
DOC analyzer.
Yeah. And our lab is pretty old. It's in kind of bad shape. I'll put it that way. It needs remodeling. And part of that remodeling would be new equipment. We need a long and short-term sludge management plan. That's required by DEQ. That's part of the ongoing consent order we have on the sludge ponds. That will be around $1 million when it's finished, but that includes cleaning the 2 sludge ponds out, which is about anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000 a pond to get that cleaned out. We have some money this year for that. We've got an engineering study going on right now to take to DEQ, and we think we can do it cheaper, but we're not going to promise anything. So the total for all those goodies is a little over $13 million, and a lot of this stuff is stuff that we just haven't been able to do because we have to use the money to operate instead of fix stuff. In the distribution system, I did I just did this 10 years. You can take it for 100 years if you want to. Water line replacement and looping lines. We've got a lot of dead-end lines that we need to get rid of. That causes problems for residents because there's no circulation. And we've got a lot of rotten water lines, as most people can count the patches in the road and know that we have a lot of main breaks. And this would kind of wholesalely fix some instead of patch. We've got 2 or 3 areas in town where almost the entire subdivision needs to be replaced. It's the ground's real acidic and it's eating the pipe up, and so we need to address that. Large meter replacement, that's for like mobile, the big industries. We don't have the money right now to buy the meters for the factories, and like OBU has a 6-inch meter. So we're really losing revenue because we've got old meters in there, but we can't afford to replace them because the larger meters are really expensive. 1 million gallon water tower, that's been talked about for years, whether we need it. When we first talked about it a few years back, it was $1 million. Now it's up to $1.50 a gallon, and it may be a little bit more than that now. So the total for that is $6.6 million. North Side Sewer Plant. Anybody that hasn't been out there should go out there and look at it. It's a really nice plant. They really take care of it. But they need addition of screw pumps. That's $500,000. But that carries large quantities of water, like when they're having rain or something like that. And then the recoating of the original screw pumps that are down there that's $350,000. There's a screw pump is a big auger and a cement trough, and the screw is epoxy coated, and there's a very fine tolerance in between, and that's how it pushes water. But when they're not coated regularly, they rust, they start falling apart, and it's just maintenance that needs to be done. VFDs, variable frequency drive. The north side works on air. It shoots air, as we call it, the bugs at the north side work on oxygen, where at the south side they work on not having oxygen. And if we had VFDs on the blower, which is a gigantic blower, the way it is now, it's either on or off. If we had VFDs and we, say, didn't have very much flow, we could turn it a quarter of the way on instead of wide open. And so that would help in the operation, and it would also lower the electric bill. Transfer switch for the generator, that just automatically, when you have a power outage, will switch to the generator. Right now, if they're in a storm or whatever, power goes out, they got to go out in the rain and the lightning and whatever, throw a switch to kick the generator on. Holding pond, a 10 million gallon holding pond. They have this at the south side plant, and basically what that is when the plant goes down, you've got a 10 million gallon holding pond that you can send the sewer to and not have a bypass until you get the problem fixed. And you get the problem fixed, and then you run that water back through the plant, so you never have an illegal bypass. DEQ doesn't like that. Sludge dewatering boxes, those are, the way we do it now is we haul sludge in a tank truck and plow it in the ground. and it's a time-consuming thing. A dewatering box would be at the plant. You would put the sludge in it, let it set overnight, maybe put a little chemical in it to help it, and then it would be basically dirt, and then you would just haul it off rather than trucking water back and forth. There's one guy at the north side plant that hauls sludge 8 hours a day, 4 days a week, and that would cut down on that. Replacement of bar screen, lower the weir height. The bar screen, basically all that does is catch the big stuff coming into the plant. The bar screen that's there now is too wide. It's letting things go through that need to be caught. The lower the weir height is that there is a weir during construction that we think was too high. We've had elevations shot and all that, and there's a certain time of year where we have to chlorinate, and then we have to go through this weir. Well, that cuts the capacity of the plant way down because the weir is at the wrong height. If it was lower, it would let more water through. So that's what that is. Addition to a drain final contact chamber, that's basically where the sludge and the air meet. The sludge settles. You take part of the sludge out and waste it. You recirculate part of the sludge to keep the bugs in. There's no drain in it right now, so we have to take a pump out there and pump it out and get down in it, and it's just a mess. It just needs a drain. I don't know why it didn't have a drain, but it didn't have one. Then valve actuators, that's just some of the valves out there that need a valve actuator. Is basically an electric gearbox that turns a valve that needs to be replaced. So total of that is $2.3 million.
Jim, are any of these items that were originally on our budget this year that we deferred because we had other emergency items come up?
Yes.
Can you tell me which ones they are?
They were,
Are they the screw pumps? Do we start there?
yeah, they were recoating the screw
Okay.
pumps. I think it was recoating the screw pumps, the transfer switch, the VFD, and the addition of the screw pump was never put in the budget because we knew.
We didn't have the revenue.
You just didn't? Okay. And another question. When we talked to the industry on the north side of town about potentially using the water that's treated at the north side treatment plant, would any of these things make that a more viable operation? Different kind of water, more capacity, anything?
Not really. Maybe
Okay.
maybe the holding pond. I mean, the holding pond could be used for maybe gray water when it wasn't needed as the holding pond.
Okay.
That's about it.
Can I step in here?
Yeah.
I don't know if people understand what gray water is. Gray water, one definition, is treated wastewater. Okay? In other words, we pull the pathogens pretty much out of them. You don't want to drink it, but at the same time, it doesn't carry near the bugs, so to speak. I mean, really, a wastewater treatment plant will clean up a river over time. Okay, because of the relative cleanliness of it. So that's what we're talking about. This is water that has been treated, not to drinking water standards, but has been treated to stream standards.
At certain times of the year, we chlorinate, but then
Yes.
before it hits the river, we dechlorinate
Yes.
because it kills fish and all that. So, and you can go, especially the north side, or even the south side, you can go where it dumps in the river, It's crystal clear. I mean, it's not, we're not talking gray water.
Yeah.
It's clear. It's just a term used to describe it. But it's just as clear as the water that comes out of the tap where it comes out of the plant.
And about 2 years ago, we did have some discussions with some of the industries up there. The wastewater plant, Northside wastewater plant, is down gradient from all of them, which means we would need to install some pumps to kick it back uphill, up gradient, west and north, into the industrial area. So we did run some initial numbers. We looked for some grant money. There was none available. And as was pointed out earlier, there were some regulatory problems at that time.
And I think that was all of that one. South side is dead. It needs to be replaced. You could list everything that was wrong with it, and it would be everything that's down there, except the men.
Yeah, let's clarify this, though. That plant's not dead. It's meeting regulatory standards.
Yeah.
But what we mean by that is it would be more cost efficient to build a new one than fix everything that needs to be fixed. We got to be real clear on that one.
Yeah, it's a trickling filter plant, and they don't allow trickling filter plants to even be built now. And it's old, and the guys are doing the best they can to keep it going, and it's an everyday. It's not when is something going to happen, it is what's going to happen today. So it needs to be replaced with a extended aeration activated sludge system, which is exactly what the north side is, which basically works like a switch watch. It's a good deal.
Do you think that's something that needs to be done in the next 10 years, or needs to be done after 10 years from now?
I think 10 years. I think we could keep it going for 10 years. It's just, I mean, we could keep it going indefinitely. It's just how much money you want to invest in. You know, after a while, a car gets to where it costs more to keep than it does to get
I
rid of it.
understand.
When was that thing built?
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, it's somewhere in the 50s, as I recall, if my memory's right on reading those documents.
Yeah, it was.
It's half century, something like that.
It was the first sewer plant, so it's just been there a while. But anyway, it needs to be placed in wastewater collection. We did yearly pipe bursting for, I don't know how many years, 7, 8 years, something like that. And we really made a big difference in the wastewater collection system in 2 or 3 areas. We stopped I&I, which is inflow and infiltration, rainwater, that kind of stuff. We reduced to the south side plant enough water from doing pipe bursting and manhole rehab that they just barely have enough water to operate. They used to have 3.5 million a day. Now they got 1.8, something like that. So that's a very important program. It's something that needs to go on. I put 10 years. You can do it as long as you want to, because there's so many sewer lines in town. And by the time you got to the last one, it'd be time to start over. But that's a really, really good program, and it's helped a lot with the plants. It's helped a lot with the citizens having backups, because we targeted the worst possible areas naturally to try to alleviate problems.
Let me jump in real quick. By frame of reference, this year our line item for pipe bursting is $50,000. So we're off of zero.
And I think we had to use that and add some to it to do Dewey Street. Lift station rehab, we've usually averaged doing 1 lift station a year because they were ancient. And we really only like 3 more of having them all up to snuff. So, and it's a ballpark figure for a lift station is $50,000, so we could do 3 more. We would have all of our lift stations, at least in this century. And manhole rehab, I&I prevention, that goes with what I said earlier. Private line rehab, we need to do that. We've needed to do that for the 30 years I've been here, because we have private lines that run behind houses that were, it was done before it was in the city limits or before there was code enforcement, and you have 4 or 5 houses tied to one 4-inch line, and then it stops up, and then they argue over whether it's the city's line, and they argue over who's going to pay for getting it fixed. Well, usually the one that has to pay to get it fixed is the lowest one, because that's what it comes up on. And we've got them all over town, and John and me have talked about this for a while. It needs to be done. We need the money to do it, because it's not fair for some citizens to have 5 neighbors on their line, or it run 500 feet, and when we just need to put in a city sewer line. Then I put the flusher truck replacement in just because it was a big ticket item. It's time to replace it. We average, now that we have a crew that flushes sewer lines 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. That's all they do is flush. And we're getting to where we total about 1 million feet a year of flushing the sewer lines, keeping the one, we have a list of the problems. We go check them. When we get through the list, we just go through the map and we just flush sewers constantly. It's always going. It's wore out. So that is 6.3 million. Now here's where it gets really confusing. Here's some comparison fee rates from different towns, and they get kind of complicated. Like Altus, the water's $6 for a minimum, and then $2 per thousand after that. Sewer's based on water rate, and then they do the May-October thing. And Bartlesville, first 2,000 is free. 2001 to 100,000 is $333 per thousand, and it just goes on and on. I don't know if you want to stand here and read all these or not, but
you can go on. Bixby's 881, the first cut.
you can see the difference. And some of them are so complicated, like Ardmore, it would have took 4 pages to do. So I don't know how they figure their water bills. But everybody does it a different way. There's no real set way of doing it. It seems like everybody's different.
It's interesting, some reward use and some penalize use.
Yeah.
I mean, didn't we go to the penalty where the more we use?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We haven't done it yet? Okay.
We discussed it. But again, frame of reference, Shawnee, first 1,000 gallons, pay $6.21 base. From 1,000 to 4,000, it's $3.42 per thousand. 4,000 to 1 million is $3.15 per thousand. 1 million to 2 million is $2.63. And then above that is $2.57 per thousand. So in other words, our rate structure right now is the more you use, the less you pay per thousand. Okay. If you go to the western part of the United States, it's just the opposite.
And this is just about it for mine, except that I want to say we're doing more now than we ever have with less people than we've ever had. And we've got really good people. We've got excellent people at the water plant. We've got good people everywhere, and that's why we are able to do what we do with what little we have. and I want to give, I just want to plug them because they're the unsung heroes. The guy that work midnights, that if they walk through here, you wouldn't recognize them. They do a really good job. They take their job serious, and I'm proud of them. And there's things up here that we really need to do. I mean, you could sit with your hands folded and put your time in and retire and, go on your merry way. I want to leave the city of Shawnee better than when I was here. I want to accomplish things. I want to do things. I don't want to sit with my hands folded. And it gets frustrating not only for the water department, but for everybody to really see something that needs to be done and you can't do it. So we want to get things done. We're not, years ago, a city worker was maybe classified as lazy. Not anymore. I mean, we work, and the guys at the water plant and the sewer plants, they do a very good job. I encourage anybody that wants to go out and look at the north side plant. It looks like a park. I mean, they keep it mowed. They got picnic tables out there. It looks, and someday the south side will look that way, I hope, because it will have that kind of a plant. But I'll get off my soapbox now, but we got some really good employees, and they're working really hard to try to make things work.
Thanks to you. What, do we have a total? What's the total of the wish list?
Well, I may have missed some things. I had a 1 to 10 year and 11 to 20 year. The 1 to 10 year, I had 17 million. And the 11 to 20 years, I had 22 million. Round numbers.
That's good.
Okay. It's tough to project way out in the future. The projections, of course, are based for our water needs are based on the population, anticipated population, and on the commercial and industrial growth. Our best estimate right now for out to the year 2030, Jim, that's our baseline. Jim, 2030 is our baseline. Out to the year 2030, so it's 23 years from now, is hitting in at about 15 MGD peak. Now, right now, peak, we can handle about 8.5, maybe 8, something like that. 8. And we're averaging around 5 a day, 5 MGD a day, correct?
Are we that high for the year?
Over for the whole year. During the winter, of course, we run lower. During the summer, then we kick up a ways. Prior to going on rationing, we were hitting in the 7s during the day because of lawn watering primarily during the summers. That's one of the major reasons that we went into rationing. So over the year, around 5, somewhere along high 4s, low 5s. So we anticipate then our needs really to get up into 15 MGD is what we're looking for to be able to handle that kind of supply, to have that kind of supply, which of course we just don't have right now. We'll get into that. Let's talk about long-term options. One option is to expand the existing reservoir that we have, the Twin Lakes. If you go out there, you can see kind of a bowl just outside the dams for Lake 1 and 2. Suggestion has been to build another dam kind of connecting some points over there. We have looked at that. We have not studied it at the engineering. We haven't hired any experts to come in. Certainly would increase the capacity. What we struggle with in terms of recommending that is because it would be subject to the same drought conditions as the existing lakes that we have. Where, of course, our 2-mile water supplies are the Twins and West Watkins. They're within about 5 miles of each other, so when the drought hits this area, it hits those. And one thing that I would like to compliment Oklahoma City on, again, their leaders many years ago, several decades ago, they spread their drought risk by buying Canton in the northwest and then the McGee Creek and Atoka in the southeast. That's something we need to keep very seriously in mind. Which brings us to the question of other reservoirs. There are lots of plans that have been put together for different options. Scissortail has been talked about. Parker has been talked about. We have been in some discussions with other communities and other groups of people for almost 3 years now, looking at those. Maybe that will come to fruition somewhere out there in a few decades. It is very difficult to get new reservoirs permitted. It takes literally decades to do that. They're extremely expensive to build, as everyone is already aware of. So while we are always in the open to the idea of joining with building additional reservoirs, we think that we probably need to look at some other options, which I'm going to be proposing here in a moment. And I'll just go ahead and get to that in terms of available resources, and this gets to the topic of our TV coverage and newspaper coverage and so on. For, year and a half, maybe 2 years, I've been in a series of discussions. Our staff has discussed the possibility of taking a look at the Sardis Lake area. This is a rather complicated issue. Certainly, it involves a lot of strong feelings, because what we're talking about is moving water. Sardis Lake was built by the Corps of Engineers a number of years ago. There was a payment plan put together, and there has been some disagreements on how those payments should be handled. The initial construction, I don't know, was somewhere in the middle 30 million range, 36, 38 million, something of that nature. And of course, with interest costs and so on, it has climbed precipitously since that time. This is the area in southeastern Oklahoma that North Texas is very interested in. I caught a segment on OETA last week where they were talking about that as well. Sardis Lake is an available water resource. It is in existence right now. It is an Oklahoma resource that is being paid for by the state of Oklahoma, which means all of us. Now, and I'm no expert on water law, but I've been doing this for a number of years now. The key element here is the notion of beneficial use. If a water resource is available, whoever's applying for access to that water needs to show that it will be put to beneficial use. Okay? When you have a resource of that size, it essentially, to establish that use, you need to show large numbers of people that are interested. Texas has already done that. Okay? One of the monikers that we've been talking about for some time is it is important for Oklahomans to manage an Oklahoma resource, meaning Sardis for Oklahomans. Okay? And I want to thank our Senator Laster and Representative Steele in particular, who are with us, for the leadership that they're showing and the assistance they're providing us. You guys don't get the credit, so you get the blame sometimes where you have it coming or not, but you very seldom get the credit, and I want to thank both of you publicly for your help on this thing. This is one of those issues where when you talk about it, you always keep your eye on where the door is, particularly in the state capitol, don't you? Okay. What we're proposing is that we enter into an agreement with a group of central Oklahoma cities. This has not come about at the last minute. It has not come about with just kind of casual conversations. There's been an enormous amount of discussion now for nearly 2 years on this. What I will be presenting to you, and it shows November 7th, actually it's November 19th at our next meeting, a resolution of participation to state definitively that the city of Shawnee wants to participate in the movement to ensure that Sardis is managed as an Oklahoma resource. There are a number of other cities involved. You've seen it in the newspaper, Midwest City, Dell City, Norman, Edmond, Moore, Seminole, and a group of Canadian county cities as well. Chickasha, yes, sir. Estimated population of that group is a little over 1 million people. So very clearly we can establish in whatever legal forum this may or may not end up in that we have a beneficial use for this water. The stakes are high. I had the opportunity a number of years ago to give the introductory lecture on water to the senior level geology class, University of Miami of Ohio University in Oxford. I began my lecture by saying, have you heard of the term Billy the Kid and Pat Garrett and tungsten and all that? And I said, welcome to the world of water in the West. One of my favorite quotes from Mark Twain is when he said, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. And that's really true. The stakes are high because after all is said and done, you don't have a community if you don't have drinking water. Okay? Provision of drinking water is the number one service a community provides to its citizens. Everything else is secondary. Everything revolves around that. You cannot, throughout history, have a group of people staying in one place at one time without drinking water. So the first step will be a resolution of participation. We are not committing money at this time, but we are saying that we're serious about this. We're going to be in play here. There's a fundamental principle at stake also in terms of how this arrangement will be worked out, and it has to do with equity interest. By buying in on this at this stage, the city will have an ownership interest as opposed to a customer-provider relationship, and that's a key point that we need to keep in mind. Okay. The next step, I'm hoping it'll be December, it might be January, will be for the purpose of entering into a memo of understanding where we as a group of cities will be agreeing to fund our share of the cost of the study, which is going to cost a lot of money, okay, several $100,000 worth. The Shawnee share, it is based on the population of the city, all of the cities as of the 2000 census. That puts us somewhere in around 3.5% of the total cost of the study, okay. So if you figure round numbers $1 million, and I don't want to be held to that, I know I'm speaking in public, so anytime you say a number in public, you always cringe. But for purposes of illustration, if it's $1 million, which is a reasonable cost of a study of this kind, again because of the stakes, we'd be running about 35, okay, something like that, okay. Following that, in the spring, then we'll, hopefully in the spring, perhaps late summer, hopefully sooner the better, we'll have a pretty good understanding of what this whole thing's going to cost and what we will then need to come up with for our share of this equity interest. We will be negotiating a trust document at that time. It will take the form of a Title 60 intergovernmental trust between these communities. And this, I believe, based on all the analysis that we have done, is the most viable option. Okay, this is my best professional judgment based on all the experts and the analysis we've done to this point in time, given our options. We would not see that water for quite a while. There are extensive construction costs, but it could be tied in to the existing McGee Creek Atoka water line system, and we're already hooked up to that. What this will do is present us with the opportunity to protect our long-term water needs for several decades out into the future. This is big picture, long-term stuff that we have to decide now. And Dr. Crawford kind of alluded to this, and I was reminded of an assessment that was done in the Dust Bowl days. And I think it applies to other parts of our country, as Dr. Crawford mentioned. The statement was the fundamental policy error that was made back in those days is that people thought that it would start raining, and it didn't start raining. So then they were caught short. This is important stuff, and we need to give this very serious consideration. It is a proposal at this time. No decisions have been made. That's the reason we're having this discussion. So given that, let's talk about how we're going to pay for this puppy. Okay? There's three fundamental options. We can put it on the rate structure, but frankly, our rates, while not excessive, are not low compared to other cities. And we need our rate structure, and again, this is where I need to keep my eye on the exit. We're going to need to increase our rates to pay for the ongoing maintenance of needs for the plants, both water and wastewater treatment, the distribution system, the transmission system, and the collection system. As has been very clearly shown a few minutes ago, we have great needs that we have to defer, and you can defer maintenance for only so long. Next option, see if the phaser will work here, is GO bonds. That means general obligation bonds. Neva's going to get up here in just a minute to give a real quick overview. And then the third viable option is sales taxes, either half cent or 1 cent. And at that point, I will turn it to Neva, and you can get through this pretty quick, right?
Real quick, is Oklahoma City also in this process?
Yes, sir, it is.
We couldn't do it without them.
Sure. You betcha.
Because we don't know what the cost will be on this, we put together some general numbers. First of all, if you could go to the next one. Okay. General obligation, GO bonds, are issued to fund capital improvements, and they're paid off by property taxes. And right now, the city of Shawnee has $200,000 outstanding on their 1994 GO bond issue. We have 2 more payments to go, one of $100,000 due February of next year in 2008 with a coupon rate of 4.9%, and then in another year, another $100,000, and that will be paid off. If you'll go back one, please. Sorry. That's why I didn't want to do it. Right now, to the property taxes that pay our GO bonds, they're at a rate of 0.6 mils, and that was just recently certified by the Excise Board to pay off this next fiscal year's payments. To compare our mill rate to other cities in the area, just for GO bonds, the property tax for Oklahoma City is much higher than 15 mils, but 15.95% of their, nope, I said that wrong, 15 mils of their property tax go to pay off their GO bond indebtedness. Moore's mill rate is 9 mils, Del City's is almost 9, Midwest Cities is 8.32, and so on, as you see. We ran some quick numbers again. Ooh, this is even smaller. We ran a 10-year, we assumed a 4.9% interest rate on a $5 million GO bond debt over a 10-year amortization, and then another example over a 20-year amortization or a payout on those bonds. The city of Shawnee would have to use the proceeds for capital purposes, capital fund purposes, and it would take a vote of the people to put that into place. And the approximate tax rate increase to the residents for a $5 million bond issue, if it was paid over a 10-year period, would increase a person's taxes on their home by about $65 a year on a market value of $100,000 on the 10-year amortization. And for comparison, if we went with a 20-year amortization, the market value on a home of $100,000, the property tax owner would pay approximately $39 additional a year in property taxes to fund that.
Sales tax?
Can we stop there for a minute?
Yes, because I can't read these slides. I'm blind.
Okay, we're paying on West Watkins.
Yes, we are. We have other debt besides the GO bonds. So I'm talking just about the general obligation bonds. We have other forms of debt that we do pay on at this time.
I just want to remind that for everybody, okay?
Okay, let's see if I can read these.
Does that restrict our borrowing ability as well, Bill? Is there a max?
It's a revenue bond on a GO debt. We have all room to exchange that.
No.
Do you have a bond rating?
Yes, I can, but not right now. Yes. Oh, thank you. We just got our bond rating from Standard & Poor's. It was an A- rating. Just went through that. I've been here about 13 weeks. The things I've worked on come to mind. The things I haven't worked on kind of float around in my head. So you'll have to give me a little bit of time to get oriented here.
Jim, do you recall how many years we have left? We're paying somewhere around $1.5 million a year.
Yes, the AM schedule on that bounces on either side of 1.5 a year, that's correct.
For how long? What's balance? 10 years?
See, I'm thinking 12 left, but I don't know right now. Do you remember offhand, Linda?
No, but it's still like 18 million, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, there's quite a bit left. Might be 14 years still left on that thing.
And I wouldn't mind running to get our CAFR. It's right in there. I can find it really quick and I can answer those questions.
Just a general number. I mean, I know it's a lot of money, and again, it's something that we have to consider when we go out and try to find more money.
That's going to help our rates.
But I was going to say, we don't pay that through sales tax or GO bond. We pay that through our rate structure.
That's correct.
Yes.
Taking the load.
Everybody understand that? That's a really important point.
We're paying a debt service. 1.5 a year comes out of our water plant for the West Watkins.
That estimate.
Yeah, SMA, for the West Watkins debt.
Another alternative to funding a project like this might be an increase in sales tax. So we put together two slides, one to represent a 1 cent sales tax increase. 1 cent in sales tax right now, based on our sales in Shawnee, bring in approximately $5 million a year. So you can see over a 10-year period that would bring in brings in $5 million a year, and over a 10-year period would bring in $50 million. The next slide shows a half a cent.
Good start. Chart.
A half a cent, which would bring in $2.5 million a year. So over a 10-year period would bring in $25 million. And I'll turn that back over to related issues, and I'll get the CAFR in case I'll look up answers.
All right, and in the category of nothing's easy, but laying everything out, let's talk about some related issues. And then we're about done on our presentation. So thanks to everybody bearing with us. Stormwater. Stormwater is an issue. We had a very, I think, productive, long meeting on discussing stormwater not too long ago. We need to figure out a way to pay for stormwater management. And the way to consider doing that is with a fee structure. And John's done some initial research, and we can bring more information back to you. Let's talk about other issues related to water. I'm going to jump to the third bullet point first, which is recreation. West Watkins was designed as a recreation lake for which we can also pull some municipal out of it. But if we grow with any consistency at all, West Watkins and the Twins, given their safe yields, are not enough combined to meet any kind of significant growth because of the recreation pool. If we dig down too deep in that reservoir, we hit that rec pool, and the federal government stops us except in times of extreme stress. Now, we were fixing to hit that pool not that long ago. Okay, let's talk about conservation for a moment. I don't know how to phrase this very well, so I'll just be kind of blunt. I've stated before that you can't ration your way out of a drought because it shuts down the economy. Now, having said that, we still need to think in terms of conservation, because rationing is regulatory. Okay, it is imposed by the government. Conservation is attitude. Conservation is individual decisions made by individuals for the common good. That's what we really need to be thinking in terms of things like cisterns, and I really like, Joe, your suggestion. Things like, turning the water off, and getting water-saving appliances in the house. It's a whole bunch of individuals making these seemingly small decisions on a daily basis that over time have a huge positive impact. But there's a trap. That's the budget trap. A water system runs off of a fee structure, so that we need people to use water to pay the bills to run the system. So if they get to the point that they're not using too much water, there are break points to where we can't afford to run the system anymore. And that's the reason in areas where generally you have more rainfall than you need, which is about the middle of the United States east, up until here the last few years because of the Georgia and southeast, the rate structures were based on the more you use, the less you pay per 1,000 gallons, which is what our rate structure is based on. We're east of I-35, which is an arbitrary line of Indian Meridian, essentially. If you go in the west, where I began my city management career, it's just the opposite. The more you use, the more you pay per 1,000. Okay, but they have to rethink how they charge for their water as well. I think the point I'm trying to make here is I don't think it's realistic to try to put the bill for these huge capital improvements. Let me back up. I don't think it's realistic for us to enter into a long-term water supply, meaning in this case the Sardis proposal, and to base that on a rate increase. I don't think that's realistic. I hate the term hitting the easy button. I love staples, but that just kills us because people are thinking, well, we'll just hit the easy button. There is no easy button. These are tough decisions, and we've got to step up and make them. I think it's going to take some sort of vote of the people, either for sales tax or a GO bond of some kind, maybe a blend of those two. The rates, which we do need to increase, are going to have to be dealing with the infrastructure issues. I don't see any other way to do it, and I don't know anybody else that sees any other way to do it as well. And with that, we'll open this up, and I appreciate everybody's patience.
The SMA, an enterprise fund, virtually operates like a separate business.
That's correct.
And it's not been really properly funded for a long time. We have a lot of expenses. We fought through and have not revisited the tap fees and replacement of meters, just basic maintenance and function. And of course, when we first started 3 years ago, some of us, we immediately faced a 30% increase
That's correct.
in water rates, which irritated many people, rightfully so. And, I've said from day one, we need to be tying this in on a regular increase, small pieces, because we had no increase for 10 years. And it all caught up with us. And we're 3 years down the road, going on 4, and we still haven't had an increase. And we've had to return money back on a maybe ill-conceived, poorly conceived plan of tap fees and trying to recoup some of that money back to function as a business. Again, this being a separate business that ties to water. One of the few things that we have as a revenue stream is water and sales tax. That's really it for us. I mean, there's a few little fees and things that round that out. But this is one of the few things that we can control. And frankly, it's true if you look around, and people charge different amounts of money, but we're kind of spoiled by cheap water. And we paid that Atoka surcharge, and man, did everybody squall. And I have to admit, my bill, I think, doubled. And you went, wow, I'm not used to paying that for water. But that's coming. And again, we don't have an alternative source. Right now, the lakes looks wonderful and it's full of water and everybody's really happy. And if you listen to Ken Crawford, he's right. And you look at the trend, that's coming. So, but we've got to take care of business. And we do have to supply this. And Jim, bless your heart, and all you guys, you're working with wore-out equipment, trying to make it, patch it up, make it work. And at some point, it's going to catch up with us, and it's going to shut down. And we're going to be forced, just like even before I got elected, reading in the paper about the water main breaks, and there's a lot of millions and millions of dollars that were spent on emergency repairs. Businesses were out of water. The hospital was at risk. There was a lot of serious health concerns in this community. It's our responsibility as elected leaders to pay attention and make those hard decisions. And we've got to, sell people on the fact that we've all got to share in this cost. No one group or no one individual can bear this load. So, it's just something we're all going to have to own up to. And I feel very sorry for the people that are on fixed incomes. But, something's going to have to give. And the city can't keep just subsidizing this out of other funds. This thing has to function on its own.
I agree. I think that we're going to need to start thinking real seriously about indexing our water rates.
Absolutely.
Increase them a little bit every year. I think we need to establish a baseline and index them, meaning it got to go up a little bit every year, rather than wait 5 to 10 years at a time and hit them with huge increases. That's not good planning. It's not good financial planning. Again, we can put this on the rates. We can do, if we decide, and it's a big if, no decisions made, if we decide to go on this artist thing, we can put it on the rates, but people need to understand that's going to be a good pop on it. So we need to sort through, maybe we blend it, maybe rate increases plus GOP, plus sales. That's something we're going to have to work that out. We're going to have to do it in the next 4 or 5 months. We're going to have some huge decisions to make in the spring that are going to have ramifications for the next 5 to 8 decades.
Other questions or comments from the commission before we open it to the public?
I believe that one of the areas we need to start in would be in conservation. We're going to need to slow down on what we're using the water for. I believe that we're wasting too much just thinking it's always going to be here, and it's not. Well, in Japan, I noticed that in all the public places, whenever you wash your hands, it was a trickle that came down. It wasn't just full blown, let's just waste it. Over there, they recycle everything. We're just turning the spout on and just letting it run. We brush our teeth and the water just running. It's just going down. Good treated water. Joe, I love your idea. I know it didn't originate with you, but you brought it to the table with us tonight. And that's something we do need to look into. But the gray water is something that we need to consider. But right now, I believe we need to really consider slowing down. That's the first step that we need to take as citizens, is to take care of our resource. It's going to come a day where our water is going to be just as much as cable. Well, maybe we're already there. But it's going to be like electricity. What are we willing to do to keep our most valuable resource? What are we willing to do? Are we willing to pay for it, or do we just want to continue wasting it? Are we teaching our children, our grandchildren, how to save water? These things we need to educate the public on that, not just a little bit and depend on the teachers to do it in school. Yes, we do it in school. However, we need to do it at home. It all starts at home. But teaching our children that, especially the ones who were born into this boom of all this water, they think it's always available. One day, if we ever go into that drought, again, what are we going to do? We need to be prepared. Yes, we're going to have to pay more in taxes to bring water to Shawnee, to central Oklahoma. But we can't just sit on our hands and decide, well, let's let somebody else decide that. We have some tough decisions to make as a commission, and we have to just buckle up and get down with it.
We have identified some of that. Shawnee Turner with Sustainable Shawnee is a member of our Water Resource Committee and is spearheading a conservation education effort as we speak. And we're fortunate to have people like her in our community and Sustainable Shawnee that are willing to take on this task, because we can't continue to do that ourselves.
It's also very important for us to be players at the state level on water issues. Commissioner Stevens and Vice Mayor Peterson and our mayor attended the governor's water conference. Shawnee had a strong presence there. We were very heavily involved in the updating to the state water plan, comprehensive water plan. We've got to be players in this at the state level. Definitively, cannot sit this one out.
Anything else? Pam? No? Okay, any public comments?
I think this mixed funding issue you're talking about is the way to go, because you're going to have money in the pool someplace. If you're going to do construction, or like right now, you need a 35, 40,000, whatever, to go ahead and complete the study and that type of thing, you're going to have to vote on it. So as we go in fast, the rates are going to help replenish and maybe do some payoff, but that geo bond is the only way. You're going to have that. And it would be nice if somehow the city, the people that live in the city could share on that. If they want to buy a portion of the bond or something like that, because those are all tax deferred usually for city. So it's another thing, not only getting them to pass it, but say, hey, you want to buy it?
Sure, and of course, and obviously any investor could do that, could borrow paper. And again, we got an A- rating, which is pretty good.
But I'm really pleased with this. I wish about 30,000 people were here.
So do I.
Hopefully some are watching on cable.
Yeah, I hope there's at least 4 or 5 out there. And again, what Jim did on TV yesterday, that's the PR work that's getting out there, and I thought it was great.
Julie?
Where Texas is in its process of service level, are we kind of paralleling them? Are they ahead of us? They're doing some of these things that we're starting to do?
Would you repeat that?
Yeah, the question is, where is Texas in terms of the Sardis? I'm not an expert on that. Just what I have read and what I have learned through my own contacts is they're thirsty and they have a lot of money and a lot of power. They have some big guns working for them on this. I don't want to get in trouble with Texas, but I'm an Oklahoman. And proud of my heritage here. About a century ago, there was a pristine wilderness in California known as the Owens Valley. And a boy named Mulholland, like the famous Mulholland Drive you see in the movies in LA, he was the public works director for Los Angeles. And he found that valley. And they tapped that valley, and within 2 decades, it was a moonscape. And they've been working to restore that since then, and it hasn't come back yet. Now, again, I'm sure I'll get beat on. But again, there's a lot of people south of the Red River right now that are looking at Sardis real seriously. And they're making a real serious run at it right now. Speak real loud, Chris.
To give you an idea of how serious Texas is about this, they hired Oklahoma lobbyists to begin to work with the Oklahoma legislature to consider the idea of selling water.
Now, what our proposal, ours being defined as the Central Oklahoma Cities, deals with pulling the amount of water that's sustainable, which is replenishable. Okay, we're not going to damage that resource down there. It's not in our interest to do so. That's critical. Whoever ends up with the water needs to be thinking in those terms. Again, this is an Oklahoma resource.
Well, please understand that existing Oklahoma law and where we are from a regulatory standpoint is to protect that source. We've done about everything we can do to such an extent that Texas can't get it done in Oklahoma through the legislature. They have filed a lawsuit.
Yes,
And they're resorting to the courts as far as that goes. So,
that's correct.
and the other thing is that that lawsuit and the Texas proposal basically is talking about water that's below UW.
That's right, over the spillway.
Right. It's not, I don't trust them either. I don't know what they're really after in the big picture, but it's not directly about service right now. It's about the resource that we flush into the river.
That's really an important point. And I don't want to speak in hyperbole and prejudge Texas. They have expressed an interest in the entire Comanche Basin. Right now, the proposal, as I understand it, is the tailwater over the dam that goes into the Red River. And I guess from a political scientist standpoint, from a public official standpoint, that proposal is not too troubling right now. That seems reasonable. But it's hard to even say that because it seems to imply that, well, maybe we should do a deal with Texas, and that's really kind of above my pay grade. I'm not really qualified to talk about that. But I think that, again, what we're talking about is people that are Americans, and you're talking about interstate compacting. There's many examples of what's going on in the Great Lakes. And the most, I guess, direct here is the Colorado River Basin compacts between the state of Colorado and Arizona and California. That may end up where this is, but that's pure speculation on my part.
When you're in a situation where if they want the flowage beyond the dam, and they get control of that, then you have the obligation to maintain that flowage like they do on the Colorado River, which means you have to give up some of your resource in Lake Sardis if the flowage drops down to the drop.
Yeah, within the Comanche Basin, of which Sardis is a part, and I think that's an interesting argument that's being made. Again, I don't want to speak out of turn on this. Is that a fair way to phrase that, what I just said a minute ago, Senator? In terms of, it's hard to get a handle on.
Well, it's so complicated, and the lawsuit is troubling at this point because the court has just ruled that the lawsuit may proceed forward.
Yes.
The state was trying to have it basically kicked out of court early on in the process, but that was not successful. That's not to say that the lawsuit is going to be successful, but it is going to go forward at this point. So that is a concern to the state, and I would also kind of redirect us to the thought that paying for Sardis is certainly a concern for the state, and the timing is right for the type of proposal or the type of activity that you're talking about as far as Sardis, because we at the legislature will have to figure out how to pay for that pretty soon.
Yes, and I'm glad you made that point. Essentially, what the proposal is for the cities, what I call the core group, is to pay off that debt. And then, of course, we've got to figure out how to get the water up here. So again, this is a multi-year, multi-decade plan that will be put into place. What's complicating it, of course, is, again, there are a lot of people in play here. The core cities represent about 1 million people, and then, of course, you have North Texas. And, we can talk in terms of being Oklahomans, but we're also Americans, and we have to factor that into the equation. I'm not presenting the Texas case, but at the same time, I'm trying to be realistic from a political science standpoint. There are huge numbers of people that need water. And as Dr. Crawford has pointed out, there's only so much there's only so much drinking water. And so we've got to figure out how to allocate it correctly. And right now, the Sardis Lake is really not being used for drinking water.
And can I make a point too before we go any further on that? One of the benefits of what we have been working on for the last 2 years is working with a coalition, a core group of cities, to evaluate what the needs are for water for those 1 million peoples. And it appears that maybe this core group can make an offer on Sardis, and regardless of how all of that works out, it still lets us know what our future needs are for this core group of people. And if Sardis doesn't work out, then we know where we have to look for that volume of water on that, the year 2040, how much we'll need, sustainable. And I mean, we're on the right path to working toward our future. We have something that's maybe viable soon, but it will at least make us start concentrating on getting a source of water for us in the future, whether it's Sardis or another reservoir.
I think that's an excellent point. Sardis is available right now. There are a lot of people that want that resource. If we let this opportunity pass, I'm not speaking hyperbole, but I'm not sure how history will treat us, frankly, because it is available. I mean, it was built under the guidance. I think this was a Senator Kerr project as well. There were several, or at least that group of people in the 50s and early 60s, for this eventuality. And I have great respect for the lifestyle issues of the folks that live around Sardis. The Central Oklahoma cities have no intention whatsoever of damaging that lifestyle. I think that's an important point. Sir?
Is that recreation?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of recreation on it. I don't know if it was built specifically.
They already have signs about the damage. Don't take our water north.
Yeah, and we've had some discussions with some folks down there. We are sensitive to that. Again, if I can be maybe a little blunt, just because we're having this discussion, I mean, I think it's part of human nature to be afraid of the big guy, and people are kind of afraid of central Oklahoma cities because we represent nearly a third of the state. And if I'm sitting in southeastern Oklahoma and I've spent my whole life there, and say I'm the fourth generation or whatever, and my kids are going to be there and so on, I mean, I'm feeling concerned right now about where that's going to go. What we're trying to say is that we believe that this core group of cities would be much more sensitive to those needs, to those lifestyles, because we do have a commonality in our Oklahoma citizenship. Oh yeah, it's great water. Yeah, that's the question was, has anybody done any studies on the quality of Sardis? And yeah, that's high quality water. You bet. It's good stuff. Sure is. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, Mayor, I didn't mean to. Yes, sir.
Explain to me now, is Oklahoma City going to enter into this consortium or whatever? In other words, I'm concerned with their pipeline, you're going to utilize the Atoka pipeline to transfer the water to here, is that understand?
Yeah, actually, you think of it in terms of a path through the pipeline. There's a huge easement that connects central Oklahoma City, central Oklahoma, to the southeastern part of the state, the Comanche Basin. That's where the Atoka and McGee Creek reservoirs are tied into. And the Sardis Basin is somewhere, anywhere from 22 to 28 miles approximately, depending on the point of diversion.
But is Oklahoma City going, let's assume that you're successful and we get the Sardis water, we've got the water rights and we're going to bring it to Shawnee. Is this going to be a pipeline charge?
Oh, sure.
But it'll just be a delivery charge, it won't be the water charge.
Yeah, well, there's two charges. I mean, what we're talking about right now is buying into to the water rights, to the actual water. We're not talking about paying for getting it up here. But the advantage of this is we don't have to buy, we being the core cities, don't have to buy another easement, which is extremely expensive.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, Oklahoma City was looking at laying another line.
Yes, sir.
They have dual line rights.
Yeah, and there's room in that easement for a new line out in the future to handle that. And if you all remember, for nearly 7 weeks, I forget the exact days, but last year, nearly 7 weeks, we pulled water off the Atoka line. And it's a good thing that we had that. The decision makers here at that time that made that decision did us a good turn. Boy, whoever was sitting on the city commission back then, that was a good decision.
Let me ask you one more thing. But anyway, on the existing water treatment plant, if I understood his
To plant capacity. Our plant capacity right now is about 8. This is based on what we think our population will be in the year 2030.
But I mean, you had figures in there for the guy upgrade there. I think the people, I'm just speaking for myself, but if I understood that the water treatment plant would treat, the 15 million would treat West Watkins water, as well as the Shawnee water, the Sardis water, whatever, I think the people would be willing to go the initial cost on their bill or whatever, on boats or whatever, if they were positive that it's gonna work. That's a big deal. It's just kind of a gray area out there.
Sure.
Well, okay, we got a lawsuit against some engineering company that the treatment plant, the existing one doesn't work. I don't understand why it doesn't work. I just want to know if we're going to spend the money.
Capacity
the
versus
next bill and the work.
You need to speak to capacity versus treatment.
Right. Two different
Expanding to 15 MGDs
Yeah,
for a capacity,
that's correct, the peak demand. Yeah, capacity is the maximum amount of water that the plant can produce for short periods of time, okay? As opposed to average daily flows. All right, and, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, let's back up some. There has been money spent on that facility in the last, 6 or 8 years. The first 5 million, is that right, was spent to increase the capacity, add another clarifier, do some other things so that more water could flow through it. The second was spent on the treatment, the chemical process now of the more water coming through. Part of the presentation, I think, John, tonight was the increase of the capacity from 15 million, to 15 million.
That's correct.
That's right. Now, yes, can we treat 15 million? And that would be a question next too. But capacity is an expansion part of the equation, and treatment is a chemical part of the equation. Does that make sense?
It also speaks to the quality of the water you're trying to treat, which gets back to what Julie was talking about. She asked the question, how is Sardis high quality water? And the answer is yes, it's good water. So it would be easier to treat if that kind of addresses it as well. So, but our capacity has to do with the hydrologic load, how many gallons you can push through the plant.
Right.
As opposed
Quantity versus quality.
As opposed to quality, which is the ability to remove the pathogens such that the water is safe to drink. Those are two concepts that are inextricably linked but are very different. Yes, sir?
Jim, I want to ask you a question, asking for truth.
Uh-huh.
A little bit different. What is our above ground storage capacity right now with our existing towers?
Jim? So 1 million and 3.5 millions? 2.5 million.
We're at, on average, I realize it's higher than some, but on average, we're using 4 million gallons a day.
Sure, yeah, something like that. That's the reason that we need another water tank.
Yeah.
If we lose a 30-inch water line in less than a half day, the whole community's going to get that water.
Yes, but we can still move water through the 18-inch line. That was part of the 27-inch line as well, if we actually have to.
That's not what we heard. You can't cross the river. What we heard.
The 18-inch coming across the river.
That's right.
The 18's still coming across the river. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, we need to buy this transmission line. There's no question about that.
But
I'm referring to the line that we like not to fix for $250,000.
Yeah.
And had, I mean,
I
if
know.
you have the worst water break that you can imagine on a 30-inch line at the worst place, the whole community's going to be without water for an extended period.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
I think that's worth spending $250,000 in fixing that line, because you're not going to have fire service. You're going to shut your hospital
It's only fixing it that one part, though. That was the part that was going under the river. The whole line needs to be replaced.
Yeah,
No, I understand that.
yeah,
And maybe you need to in the long term, but what I thought we heard was that for $250,000 to fix the break going across the river.
The initial break.
And at least have it there as a backup. Is that-
Yeah.
Well, but again, that 27 inch
One up,
comes
yeah.
down and branches off to an 18 and a 20. Then you have a 30 coming from West Watkins. Isn't that correct? If the 27, which is the older line with the brakes, the 18 and the 20 both are going to be, aren't those connected coming out of the 27? And then don't they be off?
They're connected
Out by the dam? Depends on where it breaks. That's
The line across the river that he's talking about, the 27, it's the old line you were talking about. If we figured, if we fixed it, if we spent the money to fix it, we've never dug it up that it's not leaking. It leaks at every valve. So, it hadn't been used in a long time. So we're going to spend $250,000, we're going to drag a line across the river, and we're going to turn it on, and we're going to have these, and,
Right.
and we'll just have to chase it all the way to
Right.
town. So that's why the decision was made not to spend the money on the line that we're going to fix in the river, and 10 or 15 feet, every 10 or 15 feet, you're going to have a little spring where a bell is, that it's just,
The
It's
real
just-
option is to spend that money towards the 9 million we need, or
Right.
10 million we need to replace the
It's-
whole thing.
it's,
it's just gone. It's just rotten.
Or you mean another tower, which is only another 1 million gallons, so now you're at 3.5 million. So you bought yourself maybe a day instead of a half a day. Really, the key still is take that $1 million, plug it into that other 9-mile line, it's 10 million, and you can, so now you got $1.25 million towards the real fixing the deal for the future, for a long time, not just putting Band-Aids on things like we've done for too long.
but
This
it's,
is, I don't care how much water we get in the lake,
That's-
if you can't get it to town.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
No question.
and that has been my concern, and that's one of the reasons that we started having some of these meetings. And because if there is a break in the 30-inch line, in my opinion, it would almost be better to have a line, a sieve though it may be, bringing something to town so we're not totally dry. Totally dry. Because without that one across the river, if anything happens on the 30-inch line, it's not going to be pleasant. And I think that's something that this body needs to think about real fast. Yeah.
I'm gonna go buy a lottery ticket. If I win Wednesday, I get 60% of it. That's $7 million. That may help. Now, if everybody in town does the same thing, there's a chance we might get a little bit of money.
Haven't seen any of those big winners in town yet.
I have a question on the back.
Education also. Actually, I have several fundamental questions. I'm just trying to get a handle on. Listening to Ken, he said that really the last 8 years or so, we've seen a lot more water than we ever have. 2 of those 8 years got very close to not pumping any water out of the pipe. We actually got close to the wells, putting intake.
The lower, yeah, there are 3 valves, but that's correct.
We got to the point where we were really worried about bringing water in from the Toga just to bring it up to a level we can pull it.
That's correct.
Okay. If the previous years that he says are coming again actually come, I don't see how we can count on Twin Lakes at all. Well, I want to see the math that says how much we can count on Twin Lakes based on that projection he gave us. Because we've got this tripartite source of water, Sardis. I wonder if he makes the same presentation over in southeast Oklahoma with those same charts. What are those folks thinking about Sardis and its capacity and availability to serve us if it suffers the same thing? What's going to happen to Shawnee Lakes if in fact his predictions do come true? Which I think they probably are going to. Shawnee Lakes, it seems to me, and even West Watkins, may not be a dependable source. So how much are we counting on that plus Sardis to meet whatever that 10 million, 12 million gallons per day can be? I'm just looking for a number there. Initially, I know we're not until we get the lawsuits there.
Which lawsuit are you talking about now?
The one with Texas.
Okay.
I mean, I can see that kind of delaying everything because everybody's uncertain about what we might actually be able to do. And it doesn't seem to me like we can afford that pending kind of waiting situation. I still haven't heard the total cost of all these things. I'm very interested to know the total cost of the new 30-inch line, the total cost of the service. I mean, obviously, it's got an estimate. The total cost of bringing the plant treatment up to. I saw a lot of little pieces, but I never could in my head figure out what the total cost over 10 years is.
We have 10 to 12 million on the 9 mile line. We threw in the about 5.5 million or so on the, if we did the Atoka line, that's just a wish list. But you've got for sure the 10 to 12 million on that 9 mile line.
That's right.
You start throwing in Linda's numbers that Jim was proposing on internal stuff, and that's anywhere from 17.5 to 22 million.
Yes. Yes.
Just throwing numbers. Now, Atoka's the big elephant in the room that we don't know what's going to be. I mean, Sardis, I'm sorry, is, so that's a big question because not only do you have to go buy it with this consortium, you have to run it potentially over a mountain, 23 to 26 miles, just to get it over to dump it into Atoka. So that is not going to be cheap. And we know that roughly those numbers go around like highway numbers, $1 million a mile. So there's a pretty good chunk of change right there. Let's say it's $26 million minimum. And then to go in this lawsuit, I don't know, to buy it was 60 million, 70 million. Is that right? I'm just trying to remember what's even in the paper. Wasn't it 70 million? Something like that?
68 million, last number I heard.
So there's 68, even just right there, plus the other 26. I'm throwing you some numbers. I can say that. He might not. But I can tell you these are sources that we've all read. Some of that's going to be just common sense. And
Well, what I'm saying is that somewhere there's a fairly reasonable ballpark figure that's on the cost side, and whatever we're going to develop in terms of these rates and bonds and sales taxes and property taxes increase, we're going to have to cover that, whatever it is. It'll be very useful at some point, relatively soon, before all the spring decisions,
Right.
to see what that balance looked like, to see if it's even feasible to follow. And then I have one more point, and I don't know how well this will work, but it seems to me that what Jim said is important. What we need those in the Senate, okay, to be concerned. I'll be concerned because my personal value system, I don't know if everybody else will or not, but do we get any clout if we can show a very clear-cut conservation package that we're putting together with these 10 cities? Vis-a-vis our friends in Texas. I mean, do we get some clout by saying not only are we using the water for the benefit of the people, but we're paying attention to the fact that we're going to use a whole lot less per person per day than they're using? I mean, it seems to me there's an incentive there that might be nice in a political way to try to put something together.
I think that's a valid argument. I don't really know how to respond to it right now, though. Valid point, rather. Very clearly, the number one priority, and I've talked to our congressional representatives a lot about this. They ask me, and ask all of us on a real regular basis, say, what's the number one priority in Shawnee? And we say a new 30-inch transmission line, overwhelmingly. Over and over and over and over again. It's a new 30-inch transmission line. That's the number one priority in the city, in my view, as a city manager.
And Todd Foley just made that clear. I just talked to him before we came. He would like a one-sheet piece of paper that basically outlines our priorities, and Congresswoman Fallon would like to champion that cause as well, along with some other things. But we've also been in contact, of course, with Greg Treat from Senator Inhofe's office, who also has shared the same concern about trying to bring it from their side. So
Yeah, we applied for a grant about a year and a half ago. We weren't given, we were not successful for it. I think it's going to take special appropriation rather than run it through the grant system.
Right.
I think it's going to take a congressional appropriation to help us build this line. May represent a lot of people, just our population base is about 30, and then if you figure the number of people we supply to beyond our city limits, it's a pretty significant number of people.
We've made it clear that we have an obligation to think regionally here outside of Shawnee. We have Tecumseh, Meeker, and other Bethel, other communities that depend on us. Seminole is a part of this as well. They're concerned about the communities around them. Wewoka, Holdenville, all areas around that would supplement the wells. They have a well field of about 29 wells supplying the city of Seminole. It's kind of interesting that as we've had people come to us from Call Lake and other areas, when the first thing they said is, how much water do you think you need? And when we start telling them that we only, that we basically use an average of 4 million gallons a day, they're appalled actually that that's all that we use. I mean, they're really shocked that that's the case. Matter of fact, I think the city of Seminole potentially uses more water than we do, and they're a much smaller city. Part of that's the industry they have. So, and that's the other part is this affects economic development. We purposely have not pursued heavy water users for our community, and that's just not high on our priority list.
That's correct.
We're going to move forward. So that also restricts us as to the development that we have. So those are all things to consider. The other thing, we're talking about 140,000 acre feet of water potentially available in Sardis Lake, and that's with the 10 communities with 1 million people. We have our percentage, and that's all it is. This isn't like an unlimited supply. So now we're talking about Shawnee. Now you plug in Tecumseh, and you plug in, potentially Tecumseh, and Meeker, and Bethel, and other communities, and Seminole's looking at the same thing. It's not going to go very far. So this isn't the end all. Once again, I still think that at some point we still got to have another plan B and C, whether that be Scissortail, Parker, Tate Mountain, whatever, some of these reservoirs around us that are fed by streams and other tributaries, rivers, other than us depending on our little watershed, feeding these lakes that are built on top of a hill. So, all those things just don't add up. I mean, it doesn't take much mechanical knowledge to figure out that that's a great system it's a cheap way to bring water into this community down at the bottom of the hill. But why are we building these things in a basin? And why aren't they fed by another source? And everyone asks that question: divert the river, bring another creek in, feed this thing some way. And, maybe we've just got to look a little bit further outside to the south and to the east, to some areas where there are big ravines. And one of the proposals is actually only to have to build a 1/4 mile dam. Well, that's a pretty small dam for the water, the capacity. And if I recall, I'm trying to remember the proposal we saw, but it was much more than 140,000 acre feet. It was actually much, much larger even than Lake Thunderbird in area. So there are a lot still other potentials out there that cost money. But again, part of this consortium, they're not far from the Atoka line. Oklahoma City can buy into this thing. Oklahoma City is really the key. We're all collectively, small communities, pooling our money together. Could never do this without Oklahoma City.
That's correct.
And you can be afraid all you want, but actually Oklahoma City needs us too. Oklahoma City needs the rural element in order to qualify with the Water Resource Board, because they know that Oklahoma City would love to be the water power and the king in this part of the country. And they're not going to let them do it unless we're part of it. So we have a little bit of a bargaining chip here, just the fact that we represent also quite a few people in that consortium.
Yeah, Prime Minister sounds better than King.
Prime Minister,
In other words, they're the big dog in the hunt, so to speak.
Absolutely.
But they need the rest of us as well to make this thing work. But I think it's naive to think that we can do this without Oklahoma City.
And they know as well that, I mean, they're starting to talk regional.
And to their credit, I mean, my dialogue with Oklahoma City has been very professional. They've been very open. And frankly, it's been a good group to work with. I want to make that very clear. I mean, there's a lot of people that like to shoot at Oklahoma City, but you're not going to hear that coming from me. I've been working with them now for 3 years, and had an excellent relationship with them. They are very sensitive to the needs of Shawnee and southeastern Oklahoma, for that matter.
Okay.
But Chuck, back to you. You're right. The transmission line is number one, and we're moving.
And I understand that's my concern is if that transmission line is not going to happen within the next year,
Yeah.
So it's getting.
Yeah, it is, it is a cost-benefit analysis. Also factored into that is our ability to fix leaks. Again, it's a risk-benefit analysis because we can fix a big chunk of those leaks in a matter of hours. That was factored into it as well. It's a fair way to say it, isn't it, Jim? When we were doing that analysis, and John?
I still go back to, is that part of the line where the greatest risk of a break is? That's my question.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Aren't there other parts that are older?
Just hydro test the lines. I mean, we did that 5 months all the way around.
Yeah, John, you want to comment on that?
So, but the question is that the part of the line that is under the greatest susceptibility to break?
It's already pulled apart.
You got to make sure we're talking about which lines we're talking
Right.
about. We're on two different conversations right now. What was
Is
your
it the
last
oldest
statement?
line? Is it the oldest? Is it?
Is the 18?
Okay. So, I mean, I'm trying to make my point here that the oldest part of the line is the one that's turned off that came from the old well fields. It's prior to 1935. You know, the question, of course, is again, spending $250,000 on is that the place that is under the greatest risk, or is it somewhere else in this older part of the line? I'm trying to get to that point. I don't know that anybody knows, huh?
Mayor, it doesn't matter. If we've only got one line,
Yeah.
we've got no backup. I mean, the cost benefit analysis is zero if the line doesn't break. We've wasted $250,000. If that line breaks, somebody may really get a call.
But the quarter, you know, if it doesn't break there, what if it breaks further up where it's older? It's the same deal. Now it's weeping off, it's broken, and it's weeping into the ground further up the line where it's older.
We're not talking about that line.
They're talking about if the 30-inch
Right.
breaks.
Right.
Needs to pay water to.
Right. But the $250,000 ain't going to fix that.
No, $4 million used to fix the 20-inch.
Right. That's where we're getting the confusion going here, and what I'm saying, $250,000 ain't going to fix this thing. It's not going to make you sleep at night better.
Link?
30-inch line is fine. If you put in,
Yeah, that's a key point. And it's not the old line. It's about half the age of the other one. Link?
If you put in $250,000 fix under the river with new materials, why couldn't it be utilized as part of the future river crossing for the new line that you put in, and then that money's not wasted?
Because we'd like to have a 30-inch line all the way.
As in slip line in it or something, or?
It's whatever, you know, however, if you divide the 30-inch line into two 15-inch lines when it gets to the river, when you put in the 30-inch line, whatever. I'm just saying, if you put in, if you do what Chuck says, and you fix the line under the river with new materials now, there's no reason you can't use it when you spend the $9 million to put in the new line.
Yeah.
Down the road.
Yeah.
So it's not, it's naive to think that we totally wasted if we think ahead and design it properly.
Sure. That's valid. Yeah.
Other than we want a 30-inch line all the way
We
down.
need a new
not short it
30.
down anywhere.
That's right.
You could do that. That's probably going to cost more than $250,000 for a 30-inch line, cost whatever it is.
But,
if it would cost more, we sure could look at it and come up with a price for it.
yep.
And we're going to be in the same easement.
And again,
That section of the line
how we pay for it.
for 30-inch, more of the chance it would be whatever we use. At this point, we're dealing with this, it's a 30-inch line to be next, just be here for backup.
That's right.
I hope, yeah,
We come up with a dollar now.
Okay.
and I don't, you know, certainly staff's here as long as anybody wants, and we'd be happy to have some sidebars. I thought it was important, we all did, City Commission, thought it was important for everybody to hear the straight skinny. And now everybody knows the straight skinny, so to speak. This is the truth. This is what we're dealing with. These are the stakes. This is the cost-benefit analysis. These are the dollars. And these are the decisions that we're going to have in front of us. And we are analyzing this constantly.
And I appreciate the questions because, you know, we think we know, and we think we know the questions, we think we know the answers, and sometimes we have to discuss it in public to decide, you know, is this viable or not? And, I mean, we can agree and disagree or whatever, the bottom line is, regardless, there's going to be a lot of money that's going to have to be spent here very soon for us to look at the future, and whether we patch things up, but for now, that's okay. But we need to do this right. Let's not put Band-Aids on things anymore. Let's just do it right. We're a good community.
I will be presenting on the November 19th meeting for consideration to join into the Sardis proposal.
Okay.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Can we get a motion to adjourn then, and we can have our sidebars?
So moved.
Motion by Vice Mayor Peterson, second by Commissioner O'Neill. Call roll, please.
Stevens, I'm sorry, Peterson,
Okay, aye.
O'Neill,
All right.
Stevens,
Aye.
Mills,
Aye.
Young.
All right. All right.
Motion carries.
We are adjourned.